What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Bridging the Geekdoms. I'm your host, Robert Slavinsky, and today on this show, we're doing something different. We're jumping into the realm of interviews with content creators and cosplayers, and hopefully at some point celebrities and so much more. The whole idea behind this is to utilize our name, Bridging the Geekdoms, more. We want to get out there and talk to people who are in the geek realm, who are nerds, who are just in the thick of it, and find out how they got there, why they're there, what is driving them to be creative in that form. So today, I'm so excited that I get to have this as my first interview, because this guy has done a lot for me over the last few years, and really pushing me to be better, and for this channel and for this podcast to be all that it is. And that is John Horsley. John Horsley from Spoiler Country. Not only is he a podcast host, but he is a network runner. He runs the Spoilerverse network, which we are a part of. He's also a comic book creator, a musician, and we get into all of that on this show today. It is an amazing, amazing interview that I have with him. I hope that you all stick around, check out the entire interview, because I think you're going to be amazed at the journey that he has gone on to get to where he is today, and bringing in so many talented people and passionate people to be part of his network, his podcast, and everything. So guys, sit back, check out my interview with John Horsley from Spoiler Country. But anyways, I mean, the whole point of me sitting down with you is, obviously, we've discussed how we're kind of changing a little bit with Bridging the Geekdoms, and I'm going to start doing more interviews in a way. It's not to copy you guys, but
not to copy you, but
No, really, it boils down to that. It seems like people, that's kind of the thing right now when it comes to podcasting. So figured, what the hell, let's jump in on it and try and put a little twist of our own onto the whole interview side of things, because so many people anymore, when they do the interviews, and not necessarily Spoiler Country, but other places, they go and they interview a person and they talk about like a specific project that is at that point in time, and that's all they talk about and move forward. And sometimes that's all people can talk about because they're trying to promote something. But the whole idea for what I'm trying to do with Bridging the Geekdoms is, yeah, we'll talk about that project. I have no problem, but I want to know what makes you tick. I want to know what makes you a geek. How did you get into the world of the nerd world of creating pulp culture content and stuff like that? So that's kind of what I'm trying to do. And I'm sure everybody says that they're going to try and do that, but you know what? The hell with them. I'm trying it myself. So let's see what happens here.
You have the name to do it. You're the podcast name. Perfect for it.
Exactly. It's the perfect name for it. Yeah. So I will be reaching out to just content creators, cosplayers. Hopefully at some point I can move into the celebrity realm of things, and insiders, even just people that have connections within the pop culture world. That's all I'm trying to do is reach out to them.
Random people on the streets.
Why yes. Not? Yeah. Why not? Why the hell not? Just, hey, you look like you like Spider-Man. Come on my show.
Sir, I'm trying to pee. Leave me alone.
But anyway, I kind of want to get into everything here and get stuff started. So, John, thank you so much for jumping on here with me. You and I, we go back a few years now. We've
more than one.
Yeah. More than one. Yeah. I do, first and foremost, I have to thank you. I do have to thank you for everything that you've done. Both you and your co-host over at Spoiler Country, Kenrick, have done a lot in helping me improve my show, just by sound, look, or even just the drive to continue doing it. So thank you so much for all that.
Oh man, you're so welcome. It's been a fun journey.
So far,
you grow. Well, so far, watching you grow and watching us grow, and like being able to bounce ideas off you for the last couple of years has been, been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of the one thing I like about our relationship that we have is I'm not afraid to just ask you your honest opinion about something, and I always hope that you're going to tell me.
Give it.
Exactly, and that's what I want. My co-host Colton, I'll bounce something off of him, And it's like, it's always like, hey, that's cool.
Right.
It's like, yeah, but I don't like this aspect of it. What do you think?
Not,
Oh yeah, that sucks. Like,
yeah,
he's
not
like a yes
everything's
man.
cool. It's okay to not like things. It's okay to not like something. It's okay.
Exactly. So that's one reason I like having you to just throw stuff at. But I know that you do that to me sometimes. I know you throw stuff at me and hope for an honest opinion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let me ask you, obviously, the big question here. What is it that got you into your love for everything geeky? Because you go from comics to film to everything. You love it all. But what got you into that and so passionate about it?
So it's kind of an easy one. It's my dad. My dad has been a comic book lover, or who was. He passed away, in 2013. But my dad was a comic book lover from the time he was a kid. He was a Superman fan from when he was, 5, 6 years old back in the 50s, all the way through. When I was 5, 6 years old, he had collected Superman 1 through 423. So he had the entire set of the first series. He also had, 424 on of the Adventure Superman. He had amassed a pretty complete collection of Action Comics back to about issue 10 or so. He had collected insert Marvel title here 1 through 50 of all of them. He had X-Men 1 through 50, Avengers, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, you name it, he had it. He was planning on opening up a comic book shop at one point, so he had filled an 8x10 bedroom at our house full of comic books, like floor to ceiling boxes of comics. Because he would, in the late 70s, early 80s, he would just go buy all the Silver Age and Golden Age comics he could find everywhere. At one point in his life, he held the record for the most expensive comic book sold. He sold an Action Comics #1 and a Detective 27 and a Marvel Comics #1 for an officer in the Navy who he worked for the Air Force and he worked for the government. But it's officer in the Navy or Navy Air Force, one of the two. I can't remember which one it was. But the guy had these old comic books and he held the record. He sold in 1974, I think it was. He sold an Action Comics #1 for like $12,000, which at the time was the record for a comic book sale. And he was like in the paper for it and shit. And he was hella nerdy into comics all the time. And we went, like, I always told the story, like the first time I ever saw or experienced like Superman 1 and 2 and Back to the Future was not by watching them on a movie. It was because my dad recorded them on an audio cassette. And on a family trip, he'd put it in there and we'd listen to it. So my first time, we were so nerdy that we just listened to movies like that. It was a lot of fun. And so yeah, my dad got me into it as a kid. My first comics were like the Archie comics and like the funny animal ones. But then I got into Superman and Batman and then Wolverine, and he just encouraged me to buy and read all these comics. And then lo and behold, it turns into, in my teenage years, him, my sister, and myself, we all start a business reselling comics. So yeah, I mean, it all stems from my dad and him just like not pushing him on me, but it's like I was always exposed to comic books and superheroes and the world of pop culture through him.
It seems like that's how everybody gets into it. It's a parent, it's an adult in somebody's life who is just into comics, and you kind of fall into that love of what they are enjoying. So whether it's a comic book or movies, for me, it was Batman with my dad. I was sitting on his lap as a little kid watching the reruns of 1966 Batman. And that's what got me started on my journey, I should say.
But that show, that show so much.
That's the thing. There's a lot of you either love it or you hate it. There's nobody that's in the middle with that show. I just love it because of the nostalgia and remembering with my dad. But honestly, when I sit there and watch it critically, I'm like, oof, what are they doing?
Yeah, he hated it because it made Batman a joke. Mm-hmm. Right, but Batman's supposed to be this Caped Crusader in the Dark Knight, and he hated it because like you watch it, it's like it's funny, it's entertaining, but it's like not Batman. But I was like, I'm indifferent to the show. Like at times I like it, at times I don't. I like it for what it is. I like it for what it did for Batman at that time. It skyrocketed its popularity into the normal person's view. And that was cool for me. I mean, as far as is it a good portrayal of Batman? No, but it's fun at times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a step in the journey of that genre in media. Without that, we wouldn't have gotten what we have today. So while it's a necessary evil, I guess, which really isn't evil, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, without Batman 66, we wouldn't have the goofiness of the 60s Batman in the comics. And we also wouldn't have the stark opposite of the Neil Adams Batman in the 70s.
Yeah.
Right? Because Neil Adams Batman was so intensely detective and dark in response to the 60s silly Batman. Like Neil Adams wouldn't have gone that dark had he not been trying to overcorrect for what happened in the 60s. So I mean, it's a balance.
Absolutely. So your journey begins as a kid, you know, with seeing what your dad does, and your family kind of jumps in on board with doing and enjoying all that. So take us to your honestly, I'm not going to hit this yet. I want to find out your comic book writing roots, because I know you've written quite a few comic books, and that was even before your podcasting adventures. Yeah. So what got you to that point?
So I took a creative writing class in high school. I always wanted to make comics. When I was a kid, I would draw stupid ass comics. I remember I drew one of them called The Adventures of Skit, which is this guy who would just like walk into a rake, stupid slapstick stuff.
Yeah.
And then I would start writing like superhero-esque stuff. I didn't know what I was doing. I created a character named Beltman, who was literally just a guy covered in belts. I only drew him once. I drew him once and wrote a story about him. I didn't want to draw it because it was too many lines, Like, who would do this to themselves? No, never again. But I took a creative writing class in junior year in high school, and I ended up having a lot of fun creating these stories. And I created this character named Bob Torque, and I created I'd made a decision at the beginning of the class, because the teacher was like, we're going to write a lot of stories, poems, and stuff. Like, if you can make the entire course around one central character, you get extra credit for it. So I was like, I can do that. So I did the entire series about this character named Bob Torque, who was just like this overweight, middle-aged, like recluse guy who just had random weird things happen to him. And I just made up these other characters around him. They were just ridiculous names, ridiculous characters. And I did the whole course about him, and we had to do one story, which was supposed to be like a day in the life of the character. And I just wrote the most craziest day I could possibly think of this character. And I had a lot of fun doing it. And that turned into me translating that into a comic book, or trying to, at least, right? I started writing a script. Right? I had no idea. I was like 17 years old. I had no idea how to write a comic script. I just started writing stuff down. And then I never finished it, but I graduated high school, went to college. I kind of got out of the creative writing aspect of writing stuff for a little while, because I was doing music. For about 9 years, I was solely focused on writing and recording music. For those interested, if you listen to my podcast, Spoiler Country, the intro song is the song that I wrote and recorded with my band, a band called Artist, ARDUS. But when I got out of the bands, or towards the end of my bands, my early 20s, I decided I wanted to get back into comic books. I was like, I want to draw. So I started drawing again, because I've been drawing my whole life. And I created this comic book, a superhero comic book, about myself and my friends turning into superheroes and fighting crime. But it was like the most asinine, ridiculous dick and fart joke superhero comic I could possibly think of. I mean, the main character fought crime in the nude. Yeah, the main bad guy's name was Kapowie, and he had a supervillain henchmen who were named Biff and Bop, who were just like these overly buff guys who talked in tandem back and forth. And there's like no rhyme or reason for it. It was stupid. I wrote a full 22-page script. I drew 14 pages of it, and I was so I haven't talked about this before, but I was so dumb when I didn't know what I was doing. I thought it would be hilarious to make the panel borders. I printed out like pictures of naked ladies and then cut them up and made that the panel borders. So I thought it'd be funny. But looking back, I'm like, it's so stupid. A stupid little boy thing to do.
Pretty much, yeah.
Obviously I never printed it, but it's like, did that. That was called Y2 Christ, which was I got that name from my friend Dylan, who I based the main character on. That was his AOL screen name, was Y2 Christ, because I graduated in 2000. Really, everyone was about Y2K. So it was Y2 Christ. Then I ended up scrapping that idea, because I was like, well, this isn't coming out anywhere near as cool as I wanted it to be. The art's not that good. The writing is really subpar. I forayed that into a webcomic called Y2 Christ Light, because at that time I still had the idea of eventually finishing the superhero version of it, but I wanted to take all the same characters and make like a slice of life comic out of it, where it's just like the friends hanging out and going to college and experiencing life. So I called it Y2 Christ Light. And I started that in 2003. Because in 2002, I actually got hired by by the comic strip least I could do to draw that, to launch that comic and draw that one. And I drew a couple of that stuff and I ended up dropping out, mostly because I kind of panicked thinking I couldn't maintain a thrice weekly comic strip, and I wasn't good enough for it. So I dropped out of that, and they launched off, and they had huge success. Then I launched my own webcomic, White Stripes, like I said, in November of 2003, and I started doing that, 1 to 3 times a week, and that really lit my fire for creative juices. And then I ended up over the next 13 years publishing 3,000 comic strips over the course of 11 different series that I created. Various there was Y2CL, there was Animate, Sergeant Blinky, Free Animal Magic, PD Comics, and a couple others I can't think of the name. Oh, Jonely and Only, and a couple other ones. But I would just create series and I would just run with them and do a book where I end up printing up some books out of it, and then writing other books later on down the road. But yeah, kind of like forayed that into my need to get these jokes and ideas out of my head when I was sitting at home while working.
That's quite an adventure, for sure. Yeah. I mean, knowing you for the last few years, I've always been able to tell how creative you are and just how much you enjoy that aspect of life and just creating content, whether it is talking about a comic book or talking about what's going on with comic books in the comic book world, or even creating one yourself. And the last one, I know the thing that, or I don't know if it's the last one you created, but the one that you released just not too long ago was your anthology book, which is a fantastic read. And I know we did a podcast 2 years ago talking about it and everything like that. It's called the Ein's Anthology. I think he's going to go find it here. So he looks forward to show us all. But it is a fantastic it's just an amazing book on just the paranormal and the weird and the spooky in a way.
Yeah, this book was a lot of fun to make. Those who are watching the video, I went up and got a copy of the hardback because I wanted to show it off because I think it looks amazing.
It does.
But yeah, this is a lot of fun. This is a series that I had the idea for literally one day while drawing on a live stream. I got back into doing a lot of art, like a lot of intense art outside of webcomic stuff in about 2015, 2016. In 2016, I ended all my webcomics. I decided to retire from webcomics. I got tired of the grind, and I was doing a lot of work. It was taking a lot of time, and I wanted to do other stuff. So I retired, and I started doing more traditional art, more portraits, more trying to hone my art skills. And then I was drawing one night on a live stream on Twitch, and I was like, I had this idea just hit my head for a horror comic, a horror supernatural comic. And I love collaborating. I love working with people, as you know, with the podcast and stuff. I love working with people. And I was like, how cool would it be to do an anthology? It's not like a normal anthology, because usually an anthology is just a collection of stories that don't really relate. They may have a similar topic, but they're not intertwined. I was like,
good example for people out there now is think of the show on Netflix, Black Mirror.
Yeah.
They're all the movie or the shows don't connect with each other, but the driving point of everything is it all has to do with technology in the world. So that's kind of what he's talking about. If you weren't sure what an anthology is, there's an example.
Yeah, but this anthology the anthology is not the stories. The anthology is the family, right? It's a collection of stories about the family of the Eins, which tell this overarching story done by different people, but all the stories connect. So I had this idea, and I was like, it's in my head, and I pitched it to my wife, and she was like, "No, you have to do this. This is a really good idea." At the time, she thought it was going to be an actual novel, not a comic. Because my wife doesn't read comics. She does, but she doesn't like comics so much. I mean, she does. She loves the art, but like my sister, who's a huge reader and loves comics and books, she has a hard time following the panels in a comic, and she would rather just read a novel version, which is fine. But I was like, no, this is a comic. She goes, "Oh, it's a comic." And I was like, "Yes." But I pitched it to her, and I pitched it to her best friend Jackie, who at the time we were doing the podcast with, the three of us for the podcast at the time, and they loved the idea. So I started writing all these ideas down. I spent 2 or 3 weeks creating characters, and then I pitched out to writers and artists, and then it took me about 2 years to get the first book done. But yeah, it's a huge, beautiful anthology. I'm very proud of this book. that tells, it's 10 stories that tell the first part of the tale of the Ainz family. And then in between each story is another story, one page between each story that kind of like links them all together. It kind of explains how they all connect a little bit. And there's 3 more books that will be coming out that'll finish the whole story. So each book tells one story, and then all 4 books together will tell the complete story of what I'm trying to tell.
Yeah, it's an impressive feat, is what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
It's what you've done, but you've gotten some amazing artists, some great writers involved in helping you flesh out this entire thing. So it is definitely amazing. Now, is there a way for people to get it today, or what's going on with it now?
If they go to ainzanthology.com, they can buy it right there.
There you go.
You can do it buy it off ainzanthology.com or off of whitetocl.net. You can buy it off both places.
Yeah. Links will be down below, obviously, in the description. So make sure you find it now or go to the website and buy it, because it's awesome. Yes. I have it. I don't have a physical copy. I have a digital copy, but yes, buy it. Check it out.
I'm very proud of that book.
And as you should, absolutely should be. It's one of those things that I read, and now my comic book reading was hit or miss. Like, it was very sporadic. Like growing up, I would read Spider-Man comics, and then my friends, whenever I became a teenager, late teens, they're like, "Oh, read this," and it was like it was Kingdom Come, and I was like, "What is this? Like, this could be comics?" So then I started diving into seeing, oh wow, there's this big world of comics. As a kid, I just thought comics were what was on the spinner rack at a Giant Eagle, or a supermarket, I should say.
Right.
And that's what I thought it was. So when my friends opened up my eyes to more, I started diving into it a whole bunch. But then I didn't realize at the time that there was this whole like independent section as well, where there's all these independent comics that are out there. So for me, growing up, it's been just very sporadic. I'm discovering new things here and there when it comes to the comic book realm. And your book, I think, kind of fits in with that. And I try to show people that, like, oh, you're into comics? How about this? Check out this thing. It's really cool. So I try to help push it as much as I can with people that I know that read comics. But definitely, you guys got to check it out. It is definitely an enjoyable read, and I can't wait to see the next volumes, because
the next book's about 60 to 70% done already.
Okay, so, fantastic.
Yeah. It's been, because I hate this bit, because of COVID and because of a lot of life things, like me having surgery and getting sick and stuff. Book 1 got delayed pretty far of getting actually sent to people, and I've told everybody, I'm like, I'm not launching book 2 until everybody has their fulfillment of book 1 they've been ordered, which is happening, which is happening right now, because I finally have all the books, and I'm through my surgery, and I finally have the time to do all this work for it. So I'm not launching book 2 until it's all done, but book 2 should actually be launching probably in about 2 months, because I'll have everything done from book 1 by then.
Fantastic. I can't wait to help support that one. So let's move on here. I want to talk to you about, because we talked about your creative side when it comes to art and writing. How did that lead into podcasting? Now, I don't want to talk about spoiler country quite yet. Okay. I want to talk about your podcasting endeavors prior to that, because I know you did a few things prior.
Yeah. So my first podcast was called Y2CL Radio. As you can tell from my shirt, if you're watching, Y2CL is like my comic, Y2 Christ Light, but I dropped all that in 2008 to be Y2CL. So I just like that moniker. My first podcast, Y2CL Radio, I started in middle of 2009. It actually started out as a web series. I did a web video of me talking for YouTube, and never released it because I hated the way I looked on camera. I was like, man, I'm such a fucking dork. Oh, can I swear? I'm sorry, I didn't ask you that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Feel free.
I have a potty mouth, so I'm curbing it so far. So I started called Y2CL Radio. I did one episode by myself, which I have released the audio of that on a stream somewhere. And then starting episode, I called it episode 0, episode 1, which is like the first real episode. My wife joined me, and it was so her and I talking about stuff. And originally I did it as a way to talk about what was happening in my comic, right? As a secondary creative force to like talk. Like, I have the webcomic going, my webcomics going. Then I have a podcast that I put out in the world, so people could hear kind of like the behind the scenes or what the stories are going on like that. And then I would bring in other webcomic people to talk about their comics and make kind of like have fun with it. And my wife joined me because I just like, I really enjoy my banter with her. and she's an outsider of it, so she brings like an outsider perspective, and she would ask good questions. But really, what it turned into was my wife and I hanging out with friends, and sometimes they made comics and just basically talking a lot of shit and having fun. And we did that for a while, and it just evolved to us doing that for I think we did like 27 episodes over the course of a year and a half originally. And then life got really hectic. I mean, my personal if I talked about my personal life, everyone would wonder how the fuck I have any time to do anything outside of that, because I have 5 kids. I have one of my sons is medically disabled, or at least he's a lot better now. But back at this time, we were in the hospital or the doctor's office. We had appointments, 2 or 3 a week, every week. We've had a lot of other things going on, and it's like all this creative stuff. The podcast was my mental way of releasing and separating myself from it to like let my brain breathe. But that's neither here nor there. We did that for a while, and I started that podcast. Like I said, for the reasons of talking about my thing, but what inspired me to actually do it was, at the time, I was listening to a lot of Radio Free Burrito from Will Wheaton. That was my introduction into podcasts, was Will Wheaton's Radio Free Burrito. Because at one day in like 2007 or 8, I just like looked up Will Wheaton for some reason. I don't even know why. I know why. It's because I heard the story about how he put out a fake story of him traveling the country on the railroads, whatever, on his website. And it took off. People thought it was real. And I looked it up. I was like, is this real? And it's like, no, it's just a joke that took off. That's when I found Radio Free Burrito, which was his very sporadic podcast he would do. And I listened to that, and I was like, that sounds like a lot of fun. Just recording yourself, talking about whatever you want to talk about. It's like a radio show when you do your own shit. That sounds fun. Then it turned into me doing Watch the Radio. Did that for a while. While I was doing that, I ended up making a lot of friends who did podcasting back in the early 2010s. I guested on a shit ton of shows. Had a lot of fun. And then I got out of podcasting for a while. We always talked about going back and doing more, but like life was just crazy. And then we didn't do more again until 2016 when I restarted White to See Radio with my wife and with Jackie. And then that's when I got back into podcasting and started getting, meeting people in the podcasting world again. So it was like once I retired my webcomic, then I got back into it fully. And that was more, when we got back into it, we didn't talk about, nothing was about like the webcomics or art. It was all strictly about, let's talk about things you want to talk about. We did like a top 5 movie episode, pretty generic podcast stuff, right? What's the favorite things? But, we have a lot of fun with it because, I'm super nerdy. My wife's kind of nerdy. And then our friend Jackie is not really nerdy at all. And we just have, good banter back and forth talking about stuff. And we would do like, top 5 TV shows, which ended up being like, our top, 20, because we can't pick 5 because we're ridiculous. And we did one on like our top 5 favorite songs, which was the first time I ever got a YouTube strike, because we actually played clips of the song. Mm-hmm. Which, if this is on YouTube, you're a fucking idiot, because you guys don't follow fair use at all. Because fair use policy means I can play 5 seconds of whatever the fuck I want to legally, but you guys like, nope, you play 2 seconds of a song, fucking copyright strike. Because apparently YouTube doesn't have to follow the laws, but that's a whole different topic.
Very true.
But hell, they even copyright struck us for songs that we own.
Yeah, they do that.
But so that's how I got back into it. Started guessing on podcasts like that, and then started other shows.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, your journey, I don't want to keep using the same words, but your journey to get to where you are now is just incredible. I mean, you said it here just a few minutes ago about how hectic your life is, your personal life. But when you take a look at everything that you've done so far in your life, that's not just your personal life, but your creative life, that's just as hectic. You've just done so much and so many different things, and to get to where you're at now, it's incredible. And whether you believe it yourself or not, you are incredibly successful in your creative life. I mean, from everything that you've done, it's been a phenomenal ride for you, I'm sure. And the fact that I get to see at least the last few years of it has been fantastic. But now I want to get into something that obviously relates to me a little bit more because of what happened. But in 2017, you started a podcast called Spoiler Country.
Yep.
Explain to me how that got started.
Man, so the co-host, my main co-host, the 2 creators of Spoiler Country is myself and Kenrick Regan. Kenrick is actually my wife's uncle. Okay. So Kenrick and I got introduced at family events. You know, I met him at like Thanksgiving and Christmas and stuff like that. We would always talk, and he was always the only one in the family that I could talk comics with because he's also nerdy. So every Thanksgiving or family event, every time we see each other, we would end up talking about Superman or Batman or comic books or the Marvel movies, the DC movies, whatever. And then probably in 2015, 2016, we were sitting, I remember very vividly, we were sitting outside at my mother-in-law's house on the deck looking out, they live on a lake, so looking at the lake, and we're talking, we're like, man, we should do a YouTube show just talking about comics, because this is a lot of fun. Because we would text back and forth all the time, and it was, you know, to us, it was hilarious, right?
Mhm.
I mean, other people probably read our conversation and be like, this is stupid, but to us, it was really funny. We're like, man, we should just print our text back and forth and do a fucking book. That'd be awesome. To us, that would have been great. I know it probably would have been terrible. Like, I understand nobody's gonna find our humor funny besides us, but you know, it turned into like, we should do a YouTube show. I'm like, yeah, man, but how do we do it? Because he lived like an hour and a half away from us. Like, man, we could rent a storage unit somewhere in the middle, set that up as a studio, and we can just meet there once a week to do recordings. I'm like, yeah, it's a great idea. So we banter back and forth on that for a while, and then we're like, man, we should just do a podcast. I was like, yeah, we can do a podcast. I mean, because then it's just like we can do it remotely, not a big deal. And then we went and saw Kevin Smith live, and his mom had bought him 2 tickets to see Kevin Smith in Bellevue for a live event. It was very intimate. It was like at a bar. There was like maybe 40 people in the audience. It was packed. It was maybe 40 or 50 people in the audience. It was really cool. And we were like right up front. I mean, I was like maybe 8 feet, 10 feet from Kevin Smith as he was talking. And it was, he was funny, hilarious, but he ended the show by basically saying, look, if there's something you want to do creatively, just do it. Just get out there and do it. You might fail, and that's okay. But you're going to learn from that failure. But just get out there and fucking do it. Because if you don't do it, you're always going to wonder why you didn't do it. Like, you might fail horribly, but you might succeed. So do it, because you never know how you're going to feel if you don't do it. And so we walked out of that show basically going, let's fucking do it. So we got the equipment. Kendrick bought a Blue Yeti. I had my stuff from, you know, the Watch the Radio podcast I was doing, which is now called Haphazard Adventures. And we started doing it, and we planned it out. And then on July 2nd, 2017, we sat down and recorded our first episode, which is actually today, 4 years ago, because today is July 2nd, 2021.
Do you listen to podcasts that sound like this? Hey, welcome back to the Super OK Podcast, where our audio sounds mediocre.
Or do you prefer podcasts that sound more like this? Crisp, clear, fun, easy to listen to, and full of awesomeness? Well, you should check out Spoiler Country, hosted exclusively over at Spoilerverse.com. But so today's our 40th anniversary. Yay, happy anniversary! We recorded an episode, and it wasn't meant to be like a full episode, a real episode. It was meant to be just like a test run. That's why it's called Going In Dry. But we had a lot of fun doing this. So we just released it. And so it's all awkward. Like it starts off with basically, you know, are we on? You know, it's all like super awkward. We talk about stuff, and then I mixed it down and released it that night, and then it got some plays, and it didn't do gangbusters, obviously. It's our first episode in a brand new feed and stuff like that. We didn't know what we were doing. I know what I was doing as far as like how to do it, but we didn't know what we were doing as far as like how we're going to structure our show. We had no music, we had no intro, it was very, very like just 2 guys talking into the void. And then like we did another episode, and then we got the comic shop that Kendrick goes to was like, hey, you guys want to go to Comic-Con? We're like, I got shop tickets to San Diego Comic-Con if you guys want to go down there. We're like, for your podcast. I'm like, we've been doing the podcast for 6 days, and now we're going to San Diego Comic-Con for it. And so we got sponsored from Mill Geek Comics in Mill Creek, Washington, to go to San Diego Comic-Con. All we had, you know, our tickets were paid for. We had tickets into the retailer event. We had tickets into the Skybound event, which was awesome. Which we're gonna meet Robert Kirkman and have drinks and dinner with them. We got a bunch of free comics, and so we just you know, went to Comic-Con with him and my wife. And I took at the time my son was 13 or 14. We took my son Cody, because he was free. Like, I don't know if you know this, at Comic-Con, if your kids are under 13 or under, they're free, which is awesome. But so we went to Comic-Con within the first week of being a podcast, and it's like, oh my God. So down there we got to meet, like, we met the legendary artist Mike Grell of Green Arrow. We interviewed him, and we're just like, it was like our first event happened within like our 7th episode was in San Diego, and it just kind of took off from there. And our whole idea was to do a once a week podcast, but Kendrick and I can never not record more than that, so we're always releasing like 2 or 3 a week because we just talk so often. And then we did that for, you know, that's kind of like how it started. And it was never meant to be an interview show. It was never meant to be a convention show. It was just meant to be us talking about things. We would review comics. We would just bullshit and banter back and forth. But as over time it evolved. You know, our first real guest on the show. We interviewed Mike Grell down in San Diego, and we did some quick interviews with people in San Diego in those episodes. But our first real interview was with a guy that we met in San Diego named Kevin Joseph, who has a fantastic indie comic called Tart, which is being published now by I think it's Scout Comics. I think, don't quote me on that. And it's fantastic. It's a great comic. He was our first like real interview. We had somebody call into the show. We interviewed them about his comic and talked about stuff. And then we had Scott Godleski, who at the time was drawing Copperhead and Superman. He's now just like Green Lantern and Superman for DC and other stuff. And he actually drew a story in the Nines Anthology too, which was fantastic. He drew a story that Kendrick wrote and I colored, which is awesome. And then we had, and then like our third guest was fucking Richard Kadri, the guy who writes Sandman Slim. You know, we just reached out to him on Twitter and he was like, yeah, I'll come on the show. And we're like, oh my God. And then we had Ben Timblesmith, who is an amazing creator. He came on the show and we talked about his art and stuff, but we really talked a lot about politics and life. It was really weird because he's Australian and British living in Seattle. So he has a very interesting view on world politics and the world, not like politics, like let's talk about Republicans and Democrats, but politics isn't like how it pertains to people in the world. It was a very enlightening conversation. And, you know, we just kept episodes. And then it just kind of like, you know, our first year, we released 111 episodes, which is a lot for a show to release. You know, it's damn near, you know, it's over 2 a week on average. Yeah. And we just had a lot of fun doing it. We would go to shows and record stuff, do interviews at shows. We had this idea of like, let's help promote Kickstarter. So we would do a Kickstarter signal boost where we'd have people come on and talk about the Kickstarters for 10 minutes or whatever. Really, we just like to, as you know, we like to help people, you know, in our journey of trying to become the greatest podcast in the world or whatever. We like to help people. Like, I love to share my knowledge with people as far as not only like my podcasting knowledge, but like my comic knowledge, my writing knowledge, maybe we don't want to draw things this way knowledge, you know, like how to lay stuff out. Everything I know, I want to just share with everybody and like, free open. So it's kind of like how that started and kind of evolved over time. And then, you know, as you know, maybe not the listeners or viewers know, you know, kind of like once I met you and started going further, it just blew up big.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, I met you through Deej Penhollow from Nerdtocalypse podcast.
Yep.
And he and I met on what you call Facebook.
On Tinder?
You know, yeah, on Tinder. No, it was on Facebook on a podcast group. Our podcast, which had a different name at the time, started in early 2017. Unfortunately, I lost those episodes. So if I ever find them, it'll be the lost episodes or something. But yeah, we started in early 2017, and it was probably around the time you guys got started that I met Deej online, and we started talking. He helped us along the way in getting some things set up, explaining how to better sound and edit and so on and so forth. But it was probably mid 2018 then, I'd say, that he introduced me to you in a way, because he was talking about starting a network himself. He wanted to do the Nerdtocalypse podcast network. And I know that you, and I don't know maybe if Kendrick was involved or not, we're a little hesitant in that because you were very, you say it all the time, you're a perfectionist, you're a control freak. You like to have things done a certain way. And you yourself at the time didn't have the time to invest and to make it how you think and want it to be. So Deej and I, we went off and did our own thing, and you created a small little like short podcast type of thing that you were going to like, you know what, I can't do too much, but I'll give you this.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where our story started. And I was listening to your show and following you, but it wasn't anything, you know, like, oh, okay, it's one of the podcasts. You know, I always like to try and support especially the people that I know when it comes to podcasting, because I know how hard it is to get up and running and how hard it is to get your name out there. So I was like, yeah, I'll listen to it from time to time. And then stuff happened with Nerd Tacos Podcast Network. That kind of fell apart. And then my show started to fall apart because my co-host Colton and we just had a lot going on in our life, and it kind of just fell apart. And it was you that kind of pulled me back into it. And 2019, then it was sometime in 2019, you pulled me back into it. And this is where things, I think, got really, really exciting, because this is where the early creation of the network with you guys started to take root. So that was real exciting. And at the time, I want to say you guys were probably around 200, 300 episodes into your show at that time.
Right around 200 episodes. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that's 2019. So we're talking about 2019. You're around 200 episodes. And this network idea starts to take off a little bit. You bring me on. I didn't bring Bridging the Geekdoms. What I did was I brought Shooting the Sith over, which was my Star Wars related podcast. And I brought that over, and I also started writing for your website that you had, scpod.net.
Yep.
So I kind of jumped in and was doing some things. And what it did was it lit a fire under my ass. It got me excited again about everything. And while it took me it took me until the pandemic. If you remember, it was, May of 2020 is when I brought Bridging the Geekdoms back. Yeah. Because
I was for me telling you to do it.
yeah. And my plan was this. This was my plan for Bridging the Geekdoms at the time, was to create an interview type of show where I sit down and talk to people. And it didn't happen until then. And then I did some interviews for a couple months, and then I went back and started doing what I was doing before.
Yep.
But let's get back to what I'm trying to get to here is it was your desire, your passion, your excitement for your podcast, getting to 200 episodes, and then bringing me in, me seeing that, which lit a fire under my ass to get me moving even more. So what happened? What sparked the idea for this network?
So it's a great story, I think. So essentially, Kendrick and I we've been approached multiple times by networks, right? By Nerd Talk Libs, in which we decided that we didn't selfishly, and take this however it sounds, or you want it to, we didn't want to be a part of a network. We always decided if we ever did a network, we were going to be in a network, it'd be one that we owned and controlled. Mm-hmm. Just because and it's not that I don't trust people, but it's that I don't trust people. I mean, if that makes sense, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's not like I don't trust people to like steal my shit. It's that I know what I want, and I know how to get the information to get what I want. So I want to be in control of that, and I want to be able to delegate and give people the power, not have people be delegating and give me the power. You know, it's a control free thing where I want to control what I'm working on. But so Kendrick and I, we debated doing a network because, you know, I had my podcast outside of it, Haphazard Adventures. I had the one I was doing for Nerd Talk Clips, R3, which I renamed Y2CL Radio because I took it back to just me talking, which I still do sometimes. And so we had 3 shows, plus my daughters had a podcast. We had 4 shows essentially, and then other stuff. I'm like, we should do a network sometime, but you know, we didn't want the stress of having to run a network, you know, at all. But then in late 2019, Kendrick made a post on his Facebook page. The first time he had ever talked about the podcast on his personal Facebook page, and we got a response from people of wanting to help out. And at the time we had the website going, and we had our friend Jay Roach, who was on a podcast called Mr. Holiday, or I can't remember, Miss Holiday something. He was a co-host on that. And he ended up quitting that podcast later on, but he was writing articles for us. He was doing reviews of comics, and he was our first quote unquote writer on the website. There wasn't one of us, and he started you know, a year before anybody else did. And he would just send us periodic articles or reviews or stuff he wanted. I mean, he sent us an article about tuna salad, right? Just because and it was a good. And Jay's a great writer. Jay isn't he's so curmudgeoned, but he has such a way of expressing his feelings. You read through it and you're like, it's even his tuna salad article was entertaining, right? And it's ridiculous. So he was writing for us, and he was like our first person working on there. And then I've been talking to you for a long time about all this stuff, and I think you actually wrote some other stuff for the site before the Kendrick's post too. I think you were the second one to come on there. And we had Casey Allen, he had joined up to help out with interviews here and there. And I met Casey back when we first started the podcast. He does the Comic Jam, and Casey would come on. He would do interviews with like indie comic people sometimes and send them over to us. And then he started doing more regular stuff with us. And came with that post. And then Jeff Haas, who wrote a story for Eins, was how I met Jeff. He wrote a story for Eins that's actually in book 3 of Eins. And we were friends on Facebook. And Jeff reached out to Kendrick saying, hey, I used to book people for conventions. I can help you get guests if you want. And our first we were like, okay, I mean, whatever. I mean, he gets us a couple people, that'd be great. You know, maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. And then the first guest he booked for us was Eric Larson, who is the creator of Savage Dragon, one of the longest running indie comics out there. After Spawn, you know, and then Cerebus, it's Savage Dragon, longest running. It's in a single issue, single character comic out there. It's not by Marvel or DC. And he booked Eric Larson with us, and we're like, okay, maybe this is something. And then we got Robert Venditti to come on. Robert Venditti was actually the first interview he booked with us that I did with Jeff. Robert Venditti wrote a lot of Green Lantern. Very awesome person. He's come on the show twice now. He's a very cool guy. And then we started getting some guests here and there, and it started picking up. And because of that, we're like, we built the website kicked up. We ended up, we were still toying with the idea of a network and stuff like that. But at the time, we were all hosted on Libsyn and other places. We found a hosting service called Castos that allows us to have multiple shows, but not break the bank. Like a lot of websites, if you want a network, it's like, okay, you got to pay $20 a month plus another $20 a month for each show you want to have, which is just ridiculous. But Castos wasn't that way. And we spent a lot of time talking with the Castos people in the background, telling them what we wanted to do. And they're like, no, you can totally do all that with us. Here's the features. Here's what you get when you pay for it. So we ended up signing up for Castos, which integrated directly to our website, which allowed us to easily have a feed for every podcast we wanted to do. So we're like, man, we can now essentially host any podcast on our network, meaning the people that come on to host us don't have hosting fees because we're covering it all. It's not going to kill us in the bank because Kendrick and I can afford to pay it right now. So we said, fuck it, let's do a network. So we did. And we started off with our show, and we brought in, I Talked to You, and like you said, brought in Shooting the Sith, and then eventually brought in the Geekdoms, brought in other shows. I think we have like 10 or 11 shows now. We've launched a couple of new shows. People come to me and they have new show ideas, and I talk to them about it. And then we launched like Narrative Gunslingers. We launched that one. We launched Funny Book Forensics, and then just got this whole thing. We have this now, this network of shows that they're all, each show is self-sufficient, but I also have a hand in each show a little bit to, like, for you, it's like, you and I talk about ideas and like how to do stuff, but you don't need much help beyond that. I helped you with your graphic a little bit. I cleaned it up for you. For Funny Book Forensic, I created their graphic and their template stuff, and I helped them like tone their sound, so I help each show with whatever I can, whether it be graphic stuff, whether it be ideas, whether it be helping them sound better, whether it be helping them mix better, stuff like that. And then it just kind of blew up to where now, we went from Kendrick and I doing our thing by ourselves to having a website with a couple of, 1 or 2 people helping. Now there's like 15 people and like 10 different podcasts, and a website does insane numbers, which is the numbers we get on the website just it's insane to me. I can't imagine, because it used to be, I'm not going to give away background stuff. I don't really want to, but it used to be, we'd get X number of hits on the website, and now we're getting like 100 times that, and it's insane. And it just seemed this progression of from two fat white dudes talking about comics to 2 fat white dudes running a network with a bunch of people that are passionate about what they're doing, and really just enjoying it. I don't think anybody feels like this is work right now, but now Spoiler Country specifically itself, there's 6 people who do interviews on the show. And I personally feel like, and I might be biased because, it's my show, but I personally feel like the people we have, myself, who I don't do a lot of interviews because I do all the editing and all the background stuff, and that's just what it is. But we have myself, Kenrick, Jeff, Casey, Renee, and Melissa all doing interviews. And I feel like each person does interviews in their own style, but we're as a whole, we're unique from other interview shows because we don't ask the same questions. Our interviews are more conversational. We get lots out of them, but we end a lot of interviews with the after talk with a lot of people, a lot of our guests, celebrity guests, from actors and producers and directors, all the way to comic people, basically telling us at the end, that was a lot of fun. You asked a lot of questions nobody ever asked me, and I had a lot of fun answering. I'm like, yeah, I'll come back anytime. Yeah. We have some guests who've come on 3-4 times now because they're coming back. Tom Constantino, the producer for the Orville's, we have a whole series planned with him coming out soon. They're meeting with him, and he's an awesome dude. And we have a guest that we have somebody coming on the network that you know about that I can't talk about. That's a huge name.
Yeah.
It's that they want to work with us,
Yeah.
and it's insane. And it just, I am so humbled by the fact of who I have working with us and who we have wanting to talk to us. And we have PR people reaching out to us to have their actors from shows come onto our show. Like we have HBO reaching out to us all the time. We have DC and Marvel and Valiant reaching out to us all the time to say, hey, we have a new series coming out. Do you want to talk to the writer? Do you want to talk to this actor? And we're like, okay.
Yeah.
And it's kind of nuts, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're now 4 years in, more than 700 episodes.
Yeah.
Talk about numbers. Over 700 episodes in 4 years.
740 episodes to be exact.
That is insane. Today's your 4-year anniversary, more than 700 episodes. The amount of people that you've talked to, the different types of people you've talked to, from comic book artists and writers to directors and actors and celebrities, is phenomenal. I know one of my favorite interviews that you guys have done was John Wesley Shipp. Was a fantastic interview. Not saying that your other interviews aren't good, but there was just something in that interview. There was something in that specific one that it just, John Wesley Shipp he just let it all out. He
opened up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was that was all Kenrick, man. Kenrick did research for that one because John Wesley Shipp to us, that was a big get because he's fantastic on the new Flash show. I loved him in the 90s Flash.
And, no, absolutely.
Kenrick did research, and Kenrick always does research. Kenrick tries to find, and I do too, we try to find interviews that people have done and not ask the questions that other people ask, right? And for that one, what opened him up so much is Kenrick watched the interview, and John Wesley Shipp had mentioned this story from his childhood, but the interview didn't pursue it more. Like he just let him say it, a little piece of it, and then stopped. So what Kenrick did, it was very well brought that story up, and then asked a couple of follow-up questions about that story, which then just opened up the world of John Wesley Shipp, just like basically opening up and talking about all this really deep stuff. And it was fantastic. The guy was such an awesome person to talk to. And he was giving us so much of his time. And we literally had to stop the interview because, like, man, if we don't stop this, we're going to be here all night with you. And he's like, well, that's fine. And he's like, I know, but we want you to come back sometime and like us.
Definitely. Yeah. Now, a name that you haven't mentioned yet, and I feel like I have to mention this name because I feel he's done a lot for everything that's been going on behind the scenes. And you don't need to get real specific with anything. I know that. But he is somebody who you now will see on your Make My Marvel episodes. Yep. And that's Andrew Sumner.
Yep.
Explain to me what happened there, how he got involved, because he is from across the pond. He's not anywhere near us. So how did he get involved with Spoiler Country and then essentially, in a way, helping out from time to time with the network? What happened there?
It's a great story. So we met Sumner. We call him Sumner. His name's Andrew Sumner. He goes by Sumner. We met him at San Diego in 2017 when we first went. Yeah. Andrew Sumner is the executive vice president of Titan Merchandise. Titan Merchandise also has Titan Comics, Titan Books, and they're owned by Forbidden Planet Comics, which is the largest comic book pop culture store in England, right? So it's a pretty big company. They're also like the 8th or 9th largest comic book publisher in the world. They publish all the Doctor Who stuff. They publish all the Mike Hammer stuff. I mean, really good stuff. They publish the art books for like Into the Spider-Verse, stuff like that. They're great stuff. So we met him because at the retailer event, all the different retailers, or like 9 retailers do like 10-minute talks about what's coming out new with their stuff, right? Marvel does one, DC does one, Valiant does one, and Titan Comics does one. Well, Andrew is a very good presenter and talker, and he's very good at what he does. So he presents the Titan panel for this. And we met him because above all the other presentations, his was the best. Like, his was funny. His was very personal. It didn't feel like a business presentation. It felt like a guy up there telling you awesome stories about really cool stuff coming out. So, and we ended up talking to him at this thing a little bit. And then he's like, hey, I'm going to come by the Titan booth. We'll chat a little more. So we went over there and chatted with him for like 15, 20 minutes in 2017 and didn't think anything of it. We didn't record with him then. We just kind of chatted with him about stuff. And we met the Doctor Who writers there, and they're like, we had this whole thing set up. He's like, yeah, man, if you want to interview them for your podcast, just give this guy your information and through email. So we emailed with Titan back and forth for about a year. we could never get schedules to line up because all the writers were in England and we were here, and timing never worked.
Yeah.
Then in 2018, we were there again. We saw him again at the panel, and we went back over to talk to him afterwards. He's like, he remembered who we were, which for us was cool because we were just two white dudes, two American white dudes talking to a British guy for like 15 minutes, and he remembered us a year later.
Yeah.
And that time we actually recorded with him, like, hey man, do you mind if can you tell your Captain America wallet story for the podcast? He's like, yeah, I'd love to. So we told that story, and then we exchanged information because we had a really great, like the bromance was brewing, man. It was there. And he's like, hey guys, I'm in Seattle a lot for business. I talk to the Hot Topic people and all these other people. Do you guys want to get a beer sometime? I'm like, fuck yeah. So like literally a week after Comic-Con, he was in Seattle, and he's like, hey man, you guys want to get a beer? He's like, bring your podcast to him and let's record a podcast. And I'm like, all right. So we met him at the Pioneer Square bar, which was empty when we went there. And we just set up, we asked the bartender, hey man, do you mind if we just like record some audio in here for a podcast? He's like, nah, go for it, man. So we sat down with my little H6 recorder and little lapel mics that I bought. And we just sat there for like 2.5 hours, just talking with Sumner about comics and movies and history and all this stuff. And it was just so much fun. Sitting there just drinking beer and talking with him. And that became a regular thing to where we would meet up with him when he came to Seattle and record. He'd be like, hey man, I'm gonna be in Seattle next week. You guys have time to meet up? I'm like, for you, Sumner, of course. Mm-hmm. So we would chat with him online all the time. And then about 2 or 3 years into this friendship with him of doing these episodes with him, he came to us, he was like, hey mates, I got an idea for a podcast.
I like how you added the mates there, by the way.
That's what he does all the time. Right? He's very British. He had this idea for a podcast, and he told us, he was like, it was kind of cool because he was like, I've had this idea of stuff I wanted to do for a while, but I had nobody that I was wanting to work with on it until I met you guys. And he calls us boys. Until I met you boys, which I think is funny. And I was like, and he's like, he likes what we do on the Spoiler Country. He liked us personally and our personalities and stuff, and he liked the fact that how do I say this nicely? And you fall into this category too, Robert, so don't worry when I say this. We can talk about comics and be nerdy, but we're not so fucking nerdy it's awkward.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like he's like, a lot of podcasts, a lot of people out there, they're very passionate, but it comes across in a very awkward way. Mm-hmm. And we come across as two guys who love this stuff, but are still real people. Yeah. And I don't mean that as a dig to anybody. There's a thing out there, and it's not, and a lot of podcasts don't have it, a lot of podcasts do, and it's a lot of people doing it. It's personality stuff, right? And our personalities just mesh together really well. And he had this idea for a podcast for Hard Agree, and we started working on it. And I've been working with him on it for over a year now to get stuff going. It's launched now. It's doing great. He gets amazing guests on that show. But before that, he had this idea. It's like, hey, I have an idea for charity. He wanted to do Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, which we launched that last year. And it's basically him reading through, so Charles Dickens used to do a live reading of A Christmas Carol, and it's a condensed version. It's a 90-minute version of the book that can be read aloud. So he did that, and the whole idea was he recorded that, and we edited it all down, added some music and effects to it. Kendrick and I did 2 voices for it, which was a lot of fun because if you know Sumner, you know anybody who's been in the publishing world or in the media world for 30 years like he has, they're very peculiar about what they like. And so we had a Zoom session. Kendrick and I had like 4 lines to record. It took us over an hour to do it because someone was like, nope, do it like this. Nope, do it again. Nope, do it again. Nope, do it again. So we did our 4 lines, and they're edited in there, and it's pretty good. And the whole idea is each year we're going to re-release it, but with somebody else. We're going to take a part and have somebody else record those lines. So in about 10 years, it's a full-on production with a bunch of people doing different parts, right? That's the whole idea behind it. But that just turned into him working more with us, and now we have his show, Hard Agree, and then with Marvel doing all the Disney Plus shows, we decided to do a series called Make Mine Marvel TV, where it's Kenrick, Casey, Sumner, and myself talking each week about the newest episode from like WandaVision to Falcon Winter Soldier and now Loki, and it's just so much fun doing that, and we're going to bring you in for one of those here pretty soon. Because 1, you asked, and 2, I would love to have you come on for it. It'd be fun, and it's become so much fun with him, and he's really been like a mentor to us because he's been in this world. He used to be a publisher of a couple magazines. He had his own TV show on TCM. He's been working in this world doing interviews and all this kind of shit for 35 years. So he's a wealth of knowledge. So we use him as like our mentor to bounce. Hey, Sumner, is this a good idea? And he's not afraid to tell us, no, we're stupid, Mm-hmm. And he's like this huge influence on us as far like this desire for us to go to the next level. And he's like, he's kind of the same boat as Kendrick and I are, and I think in the same mindset of you is this is a lot of fun, and I will do this for free forever, but it'd be awesome to make some money.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So it's like, and to do that, there's certain things you gotta do to make money. We make some money off of ads, but I mean to make real money, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like he's this great influence, great mentor for us, and I don't think honestly, Kendrick and I would be as professional as we are without his influence, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
He's helped push us to like take some things more seriously and to like help us bounce out some bad ideas.
And I can attest to that because our relationship has been in the past few years, and I've seen both you and Kendrick grow and adapt and change and how you're running everything. And it's been for the better, 100%. I'm not going to sit there and say it isn't. So I've definitely seen that. And it kind of falls in line with, as your relationship with Sumner has grown, it seems like so has that. So it's really cool. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to show everybody that, you know, this isn't just something that is solely over in Washington. I mean, I'm over in Pennsylvania. Sumner is in the UK. Casey is down south somewhere, if I'm not mistaken. Alabama. Yeah. Jay is Illinois. I don't know if he's Chicago, but Illinois. So we are all over the place.
Oh, yeah, and Jeff is in Rhode Island. Melissa is in California. I mean, it's all over the place. And Eli, because Eli Sirota from the Blizzard the Wizard podcast and his webcomic now, which is great. He helps out sometimes, and he's in New York. I mean, and then we've got a guy, behind the scenes guy down in Florida, you know, and it's all over the place.
It's how Spoiler Country has exploded into what is known now, not Spoiler Country, but this network is now known as Spoilerverse, which is right here.
Nice shirt, by the way.
It's amazing. It's fantastic. And it has exploded, and it's larger than I think you probably ever had anticipated to this point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that leads me to my next question is what's next for you? What is next for you? What is next with Spoilerverse, Spoiler Country? What is next?
So what's next is, as you've seen and as our listeners and viewers have seen, is we're expanding into video. We're doing a lot more video stuff. Most of our interviews now are on video, which is great, which allows us to have a YouTube presence.
Yes.
We're expanding into some more short form content for YouTube. We kind of teased a little bit this last week with we had a 10-minute video on Hulk. Is Hulk a villain? Kind of like little stuff to tease stuff. We're working on. We have a lot of ideas of like fun shows we want to do, or fun like one-offs we want to do for YouTube and stuff like that. We are looking into expanding into conventions. We're looking into running a panel at Emerald City Comic Con in Seattle. One that will be live streamed as well as recorded. We're looking into doing more stuff, more live events, right? Like one of the things I want to do is, you know, we're at 740 episodes. We are, you know, 260 episodes away from 1,000, which we'll hit in the next year or two. We're looking into doing something big for 1,000, like a live show with all of us there talking to a live audience. You know, I want to do live events with an audience, and I want to do live stuff in front of audiences.
Yeah.
We're looking at doing more live stream stuff. It's kind of taking it to the next level, and then part of that is taking the network to the next level. And there's stuff I can't talk about that you know about. Like you're in the know for most of it. You're in the know more than anybody else in the network that's not Kendrick. So, and we have other shows that want to come on. We have a great new show we're interviewing to come on the network called Taper Talk. If you look over on YouTube or on stuff, they have a couple episodes out. It's two guys I know that have a great. It's kind of interview based, but not really interview based. It's more conversational based, but it's in a spectrum of not pop culture, but it's in a spectrum of the world that we don't have represented on the network, right? Which is, I think, is fantastic, because one of the things I want, Spoilerverse is not just a pop culture nerdy thing. We are a network that embraces shows that are relevant to not just our interests, but our fun, right? There's a show that it updates sometimes called Waiting for Our Miracle, which is hosted by Sal and his wife. Sal is from the Nerds of the Cryptpocalypse, which is a nerd from the Cryptpocalypse, which is like a horror-based nerdy podcast. He came to me and was like, "Hey, my wife and I want to start a podcast. It's not in the nerdy realm, but is this fit into it?" and it's about their journey of infertility and trying to have a kid, right? Which, not nerdy, not that, but that's life, right?
Yeah.
And I think life itself is important for people to hear about, and it's an exposure zone for maybe people listening to Bridging the Geekdoms or Spoiler Country or Nerds from the Crypt. Go to the website, will see this thing waiting for a miracle, and maybe they'll find it relevant to them, right?
Yeah.
And one, it's going to get out there on the podcast just by itself, but it's going to be its exposure on Spoilerverse will be great for it and for us, because maybe somebody who is having problems with infertility will find it, go to the website and go, oh, I love comic books. I love this stuff. And it's kind of cross-pollination of two different ideas that can mesh together, because, you know, I struggled with infertility before I had my first kid. You know, I was told I was infertile, and it broke me until I proved them wrong, you know? And the same thing with this other podcast is their conversations are more about real life stuff, but it all interacts, man, because what are comics but a reflection of society, right? And yes, there's superheroes and capes. Yes, there's people who can lift buildings, but if deep down those stories are reflections of current events in society, and good or bad, politics or not politics, comics reflect the world. All of those stories reflect the world. Anybody who says they doesn't read a comic book, right? I mean, there are some that are more fanciful than others, but deep down, a lot of writers relate what they're going through into a comic strip, right? Into what they're writing. And that's the beauty of pop culture, is you can relate to things in different ways. Like the way I read a book and get a story, get what out of it, what I get out of it might not be what you get out of it. And that's the beauty of comics, and that's the beauty of pop culture. So with all that being said, long-winded answer, there's a lot of cool stuff coming. Most of it I can't talk about, but it's Spoiler Country's got a lot of cool stuff coming on just for that podcast. Spoilerverse has a lot of cool stuff coming, as you know, that I've talked to you offline. That is fantastic. That requires a lot of work on the back end from us to make sure we're ready for it. And just the fact that, you know, over 740 episodes, we've talked to all these celebrities and our writers, that they know who we are, and that there are certain celebrities out there that I know that we haven't talked to yet who know who we are. Like, I can firmly say that Seth MacFarlane knows who we are and knows about our show, and has probably listened to a show, at least one. I can say that with probably about 90% certainty. And that other people, like, I can say honestly that our show has been talked about on the Supernatural set, or on the Star Trek Discovery set, or on like the HBO The Nevers set. You know, I know these things because we've talked to so many people from those shows, and that they know, and they've told us they've talked about us on set, which is insane, because when Supernatural was still going, Supernatural was 15 seasons. That's a huge show. And the fact that we've talked to pretty much all the main stars of that show, with the exception of Jared Padalecki and Jensen Ackles, we've talked to, and Misha Collins, we've talked to the rest of the main cast, from Jim Beaver to Julian Richings to Osric Chow, to Emily Swallows. Tons of these big actors, and the guy who plays Mark Pellegrino, who plays Lucifer. We've talked to all these people, and like, yeah, man, we came on because you know, Oscar was talking about you guys, or this person, or, you know, everything. And like, fuck yeah, it's so cool. You know? It's awesome.
It is. It's amazing, and I'm just, again, I'm very excited and happy that I've been able to be part of that journey in some small fashion. You know, I mean, I have helped interview from time to time. I kind of dropped out of it because my life, much like yours, is very hectic and crazy. I got one extra kid than you have, so
with one more.
So it is very, very hectic for me as well. But, you know, I just am so thankful that you've done everything that you've done, because it's gotten me to where I'm at and able to do what I'm doing here. And I love it so much. It's one of my favorite things to do. And like you said, I have no problem doing this the rest of my life for free and just having fun. But man, it would be so great to make this career. It really would. And that's the kind of passion I think people need to have with this whole medium. Is, don't go thinking I'm going to get rich, I'm going to make money. Go into it because it's what you want to do. It's something that you love. If you get that benefit of making money and getting notoriety and becoming big, awesome. But if not, you take a look at my show and my channel. I'm getting on average like 25 views on my YouTube channel. But I want it to grow, absolutely.
YouTube's hard to break, man.
But it's not stopping me. I'm just continuously going because I like doing it. So that's how people need to look at it.
Agreed. I'll add to that one thing is success in a podcast isn't monetary, right? It can be.
Yeah.
But a successful podcast is not necessarily a monetary podcast, because there's ways in which you can go and create a podcast and just go straight for money and make money. But that doesn't mean you have a good podcast.
Yeah.
Right? There's a difference there. For me and for most people, a good podcast is one that has passion, has interesting people to talk to or listen to, and is that passion and that interest comes across in how they talk. And they don't, like, I see a lot of podcasts out there that may have a good following, but they're not going to last long term because their show is based on a gimmick, right? Or it's based on pushing these offensive-ish jokes, or these trying to be edgy, right? Like I make edgy jokes. Obviously, if you ever read my comics, you know that I make the dick and fart jokes all the time. But as any good comedian or writer will tell you, there's a time and a place for those jokes to come out, and you got to make sure they're done correctly. Otherwise, it comes across as forced, right? And I see a lot of shows doing that. And they'll get a following, but it gets old quick, and then their following drops off. The passion, though, like you have in your show, and we have in our show, that I believe we have in our show, that's longevity. That keeps it going. And honestly, do you know the reason why your show and my show doesn't make a lot of money? And I'm free talking about this, and I know it. We don't push it for money. Like, I don't push it trying to get money. Like, we have 740 episodes. We have some amazing, and we just had Todd McFarlane on the show, right? But we don't have any. So as of right now, we don't put ads in our show, which we should be doing. We don't market the show to make money. We market the show to show off our conversations and us. It's a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to get to the final section of my interview show. This is something that I want to do on every interview that I have now. Again, just a way to throw a little twist into it that's a little more fun. And what's that?
Am I doing a striptease right now? Is that what this is?
Yes.
Got the tassels on. I'm good. I'm good to go.
But I'm going to ask you 5 questions.
All right.
Simple questions that I want you to answer. So they're basically this or that kind of questions.
Okay.
These, for anybody who's watching and is going to continue watching my show, this is going to be something that changes from time to time. So real quickly here, Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Trek.
DC or Marvel?
Depends on when you're talking comics or movies. DC for comics, Marvel for movies.
All right. Did Han shoot first? I can't talk.
Absolutely.
All right. Subway or Quiznos?
Quiznos.
And one thing that no one knows about you that you think is cool or strange?
Ooh. I'm kind of an open book on most things. I got to think about something that I haven't told people about. Something some people know about. I am a championship bowler. I've won state championships for bowling, and I placed 45th at nationals one time when I was 18.
Oh, that's nuts.
Yeah.
That's nuts. But there you go, guys. There's some information on John Horsley here. I want to thank him so much for jumping on the show and talking with me here, especially being the first guest of this new form of show that I'm doing. Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure, man. And I can't wait to keep working with you moving forward.
Yeah, man, it's a lot of fun. I'm happy to come back on the show for other conversations anytime you want.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, man. And I'll talk to you later, I guess.
Yeah.
There it is, guys. My discussion and talk with John Horsley of Spoiler Country. It's so great to always get time to sit down with him and discuss things. He's been on my show in the past, and we've talked about different news and items within the pop culture world, but it's amazing to sit down and hear his story on how he got to where he is today. I absolutely, like I said beforehand, I'm so excited that I got to sit down and speak with him, and for him to be the first interview for this new and improved, I'll say new and improved Bridging the Geekdoms moving forward. Absolutely. So are all of our shows going to be interview shows? No, they're not. We're still going to have our free talk episodes that covers the news in the pop culture world. You're still going to have the Bridging the Geekdoms episodes where Colton and I are sitting down and just bullshitting about different things. So fear not if you're somebody who likes that. Those things are still going to be around, but I'm going to tell you right now, you are going to get some cool interviews with some creators, with cosplayers, with just people, insiders, when it comes to the geek realm. So be prepared for that. Trying to put our own little twist on it so it's not just like everybody else's. Again, it's all about just how can we make this a place that people want to come and hang out and listen to us talk. That's what I'm trying to do here. So please in the comments below. Let me know what you thought of the interview. Let me know what your thoughts are on everything that happened today. Let me know if you're excited to see what's coming with Bridging the Geekdoms. And obviously, down in the description is everything you can find when it comes to John Horsley, Spoilerverse, Spoiler Country, other shows on the network, his Eins anthology book, which is fantastic book down there. Please go check it out. Amazing stuff from John. So again, John, thank you so much for being on my show today. It was just great to have you on and talk with you about your journey, your life, on how you got to where you are today. I want to apologize to everybody. I know that the podcast seems like it kind of ended abruptly. A little bit it did. I was having some technical difficulties, had to use a different laptop and didn't bring my charger with me. So at one point I looked down and bling, it came up and there was like 5 minutes left. So I had to hurry up and get the podcast ended, the show ended, but he will definitely be on again in different forms and fashions, whether it's interviews, whether it's talking stuff going on in the geek realm. So make sure you stay on the lookout for that. Make sure you head to Spoilerverse.com for all of your Spoilerverse needs. But yeah, with all that said, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch all of you later.